They thought she was an easy target. In the middle of a crowded diner, 3 bored bullies decided a quiet black girl was their entertainment for the afternoon, mocking her, shoving her, and finally slapping her like she didn't belong there. What they didn't know, the man walking through that door wasn't just her father. He was a Navy SEAL who'd spent years dismantling real threats, not scared boys playing tough. And the moment his eyes landed on her bruised cheek, their world started collapsing fast. The Rose Hill Diner always looked softer. At noon on Fridays, sunlight poured through the long windows in warm, buttery beams, turning the chrome counters into strips of gold. The lunch rush had thinned out, leaving only the low hum of conversation, the smell of frying bacon, and the occasional clatter of plates behind the counter. It was the kind of atmosphere that made strangers relax, and the kind that made Amara Wells wish she could disappear into the red leather booth she was sitting in. Amara, dressed in her neatly pressed school uniform, sat alone with her tray, scrambled eggs, fries, and a chocolate milkshake she'd barely touched. Her posture was small, shoulders folded inward, eyes focused on her fork. 3 weeks at Westbridge High had been enough to teach her that eating alone was safer than risking anyone noticing her. Quiet was her survival strategy. Unfortunately, quiet doesn't stop predators who wake up craving chaos. The glass door of the diner swung open with a sharp chime. Brock Hensley barged in first, his varsity jacket half-zipped, laughter booming through the room. Tyler and Mason followed behind him, one tall and twitchy, the other broad with a permanent smirk, swaggering like the diner belonged to them. Students from Westbridge recognized the trio immediately. A few sank lower in their seats, others looked away. They had that effect on people. Brock scanned the room with the arrogance of someone who always got what he wanted. His gaze flicked over empty tables, bored expressions, then like a shark smelling blood, landed on Amara. He slowed, nudged Tyler with his elbow, and whispered just loud enough for her to hear if she dared listen. "That girl's the easiest target we'll have today," Tyler snorted. Mason chuckled, and just like that, Amara's quiet bubble burst. Her hand tightened around her fork. She kept her eyes on her plate, praying, begging silently that they'd pick a booth far away. But prayers meant nothing to boys raised on entitlement. They didn't sit, they advanced. Brock reached her booth first, planting his hands on the table and leaning in as if greeting an old friend. Well, eating alone again?" he said, voice dripping fake cheerfulness. "Mind if we join? Actually, don't bother answering." Tyler and Mason flanked the booth like guards bracketing a prisoner. Amara forced herself to stay polite. I'd prefer if Brock cut her off with a grin sharp enough to slice skin. "Relax. We're just being friendly." Friendly. The word sounded like poison coming from him. Amara reached for her drink just as Brock's knuckles tapped the side of her water glass. A light touch. Intentional. Controlled. Then flick. The glass toppled over, water spilling across the table, soaking her napkins and the edge of her sleeve. A few droplets splashed onto her tray. Amara gasped softly, pulling her arm away. Brock straightened up. "Oops," he said, tone lazily mocking. "Maybe try holding your stuff better next time. Consider this a reminder." Tyler snickered. Mason pretended to cough to hide his laughter. The customers 2 tables over pretended not to see. That was how Westbridge worked. You stayed quiet, or you became the next target. Amara swallowed hard, fighting the sting in her eyes. "Please stop," she whispered. That was the wrong thing to say. Brock's amusement drained from his face. He grabbed her shoulder too tight, too sudden, forcing her to stiffen. Leaning close enough for her to smell the mint gum he chewed, he muttered, "Do you really think someone like you belongs here?" His words weren't loud, but they sliced through the warm atmosphere of the diner like a cold blade. The shift was instant. The air felt heavier. Conversations around them faltered. Even the lights seemed dimmer. A seed of danger had been planted, and no one, not Amara, not the customers pretending to ignore the scene, knew that outside, only a few blocks away, a man in military camouflage was walking steadily toward the diner. A man whose footsteps carried years of discipline. a man who did not tolerate threats, a man Amara believed was still deployed overseas, but who was, in truth, only minutes away from opening the front door. And the moment he did, Brock's world would fracture. The first slap is coming, and it will change everything. The Rose Hill diner grew louder as more customers filed in, but the tension at Amara's booth swallowed all other sounds. Conversations dipped into hushed whispers. Forks paused mid-air. People sensed danger the way animals sense incoming storms. Brock loved that. He fed on fear the way others fed on praise. Amara kept her head down, hoping silence would make them lose interest. But Brock wasn't done. He wasn't even close. With a sudden shove, he pushed her shoulder hard enough that her tray slid, flipped, and crashed onto the floor. The clatter echoed through the diner, fries scattering, eggs smearing across the tiles, the milkshake cup rolling away until it bumped into a chair. Gasps fluttered across nearby tables. Amara's breath hitched. She hadn't done anything to deserve this. She never did. Before she could gather herself, a young waitress hurried over. Lily, barely 19, with a ponytail and kind eyes. She had been watching from behind the counter, torn between fear and responsibility. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," Lily said quickly, kneeling beside Amara's spilled meal. "Let me help you clean this up." Her voice shook, but her hands were steady. She reached for a napkin. Brock's foot came down over it. He stared at Lily with a chilling smirk, a predator annoyed by an interruption. "Not your business," he said, voice low and intent. "Walk away." Lily froze, eyes widening. She wasn't built for confrontation, not with boys like him. She slowly pulled her hands back, trembling, and stood up. The entire diner watched, no one brave enough to help her. Or Amara, Tyler chuckled. Mason crossed his arms and leaned back like he was settling in for entertainment. Amara felt a cold wave rush through her. She hated seeing someone else get threatened because of her. She whispered, "Please, just leave her alone." "Wrong move." Brock straightened, jaw tightening. "You don't get to tell me what to do," he hissed. Then it happened fast and brutal. His hand whipped forward in a sharp arc and cracked across her face. The slap echoed. Lily gasped. Someone dropped a spoon. A child whimpered. For a split second, even the sizzling from the kitchen went silent. Amara's head snapped to the side, her cheek burning hot, her eyes stinging. She tasted metal, her breath tangled in her throat. The humiliation burned almost as sharply as the pain. Brock, pleased with himself, flexed his fingers like he'd just warmed up. "That got your attention," he sneered. Tyler laughed. Mason muttered, "Damn, Brock, chill." But he didn't sound like he meant it. Amara blinked back tears. One slipped down her cheek, tracing the redness swelling across her skin. Her entire body trembled, but somewhere beneath the fear, something steadier stirred, something firm enough to lift her chin a fraction. "My father," she whispered, voice shaky but clear enough to carry. "He'll be here any minute." Brock leaned back and laughed loud, mocking, cruel, the kind of laugh meant to crush hope. "Oh, Daddy's coming," he taunted. "What's he gonna do? Teach me manners?" Tyler howled. Mason grinned. Amara didn't break eye contact. "He will," she said quietly. "You don't know who he is." Brock wiped fake tears from his eyes. "Let me guess," he said dramatically. "A dentist? A pastor? A security guard at the mall?" Amara pressed her trembling hand to her cheek. "He's more than that." If Brock had been paying attention, he might have noticed the shift in Lily's expression, fear turning into something else. Recognition? Sympathy? A subtle warning? But bullies rarely notice consequences before they hit. Brock spread his arms theatrically. "Fine. Bring him on. I'd love to meet the man who raised such a little." He didn't finish, because at that exact moment, the diner's front door chimed again. A shadow crossed the entrance. Heavy boots stepped inside, but Brock didn't turn around. Not yet. The second blow is coming harder, louder, and far more dangerous than the first. For a few suspended seconds, the diner felt vacuum-sealed, every sound swallowed, every breath held hostage. The soft chatter that once filled the room had died completely. leaving only the pulse of fear beating in the walls. Amara sat frozen in the booth, her cheeks still throbbing from the first hit. Her heartbeat thudded unevenly in her ears, but she kept her chin level, her eyes on Brock. She knew any sign of weakness would only fuel him. Brock hated defiance, especially from someone he viewed as beneath him, and her words, those trembling but undeniable words, were defiance. He stepped closer, his face contorting with irritation. "Oh, you think you can talk back now?" he snarled, voice dropping into a dangerous growl. Before Amara could respond, Brock's hand snapped forward again. Slap! The second strike was louder, harder, violent enough that her head jerked sharply to the side. A fresh wave of tears flooded Amara's eyes before she could stop them. Her hand flew up to shield her cheek, but the sting had already spread deep, radiating down her jaw and into her chest. Her breath shuddered. That one hurt. That one left a ringing in her ears. A woman across the aisle gasped softly, covering her mouth. A teenage boy flinched visibly. Even the cook behind the counter paused mid-flip with a spatula in hand. Everyone saw it. Everyone understood what was happening. But no one moved. Fear roots people to their seats. Fear keeps them silent. An elderly man finally tried to stand up. His eyes were tight with disapproval, his hands trembling not from age, but anger. "Hey, that's enough," he barked. Tyler grabbed a glass from a nearby table and hurled it onto the ground. It shattered into a spray of sharp fragments, the crash ripping through the diner like a gunshot. The old man recoiled instantly, dropping back into his booth. The message was clear: sit down, or you're next. Brock smirked, satisfied with the renewed silence. He turned back to Amara, who was breathing unevenly, tears streaking down the swelling bruise on her cheek. She whispered, "Stop, please," but Brock wasn't interested in mercy. He loomed over her, shoulders tense, eyes blazing with cruel satisfaction. "Look at you," he said. "Crying already? And you really think your daddy's going to save you? You don't even know how powerless you look right now." He lifted his hand again, fingers curling in anticipation. The third slap was coming, the one meant to break her. His shadow fell over her face, his expression twisted into something almost gleeful. But just as his arm began to swing, Amara spoke. Barely audible, barely brave, but enough to freeze his hand mid-arc. "He's standing, right behind you." Her words were soft, but they cut like a blade. Brock blinked, then scoffed, rolling his eyes dramatically. "Oh, please. You think I'm falling for—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to, because the diner door chimed. Kang! The sound rang out sharp and metallic, slicing through the tension like a warning bell. Conversations didn't just pause, they died entirely. Heads turned. Customers craned their necks toward the entrance. Even Tyler and Mason, mid-snicker, stiffened. Brock froze, annoyance flickering across his face. His hand hovered inches from Amara's cheek. The air shifted. Pressure built in the room like a thunderstorm about to break. Amara's eyes remained fixed behind Brock's shoulder, wide and shimmering, not with fear this time, but something else. Something like relief and dread coiled together, because she knew exactly who had just walked in. Brock finally snapped. "Seriously, what is everyone?" He turned halfway. Not fully. Not enough to see everything. Just enough to sense that something was terribly, catastrophically wrong. The man in camouflage steps fully into the light, and Brock's fate changes forever. The bell above the diner door hadn't even stopped chiming when a long shadow stretched across the checkered tiles. Sunlight poured in behind the figure, outlining him in harsh white light, like a silhouette carved out of steel. Commander Marcus Wells stepped inside. He wore a dark camouflage jacket, dusted with road grit and creased from long travel. His boots were heavy, military issue, each step landing with purpose. His jaw was square, his expression unreadably calm, but it was his eyes sharp, searching, cold with focus that froze the entire diner. Eyes that had seen war, eyes that instantly understood everything in front of them. Marcus didn't need to ask what happened. The room told him. The spilled food, Amara's swollen cheek, the fear in the air, the three boys standing over her. He took all of it in with one glance, and his face hardened in a way that made even the bravest customer inhale sharply. Without anyone telling them to move, the people sitting nearest to the front slowly pushed their chairs back. Booths shifted, conversations died completely. A path opened through the diner not because anyone wanted to help, but because no one dared stand in this man's way. Marcus walked down that path like he'd done it 1,000 times before. Each step was slow, measured, controlled. The kind of movement that carried discipline, not hesitation. The kind of presence that made people instinctively straighten their spines. Brock still hadn't fully turned around. Annoyed by the sudden tension, he muttered, "What is with everyone today?" Then he pivoted the rest of the way. His smirk faltered, just slightly, because the man standing before him didn't look like a random customer. He didn't look like someone you bumped into at the grocery store. He didn't look like someone you wanted to piss off. He looked like someone who had broken men with his bare hands, but Brock didn't know that. He only sensed it, the way prey senses a predator too late. Mason was the first to truly react. The color drained from his face as he whispered, "Dude, something's wrong." Tyler swallowed hard, shifting his weight like he was preparing to run, not fight. Brock tried to keep his composure. Can I help you?" he asked, though his voice lacked its usual confidence. Marcus didn't answer immediately. His eyes had already moved past Brock, straight to Amara. She sat frozen in the booth, tears still drying on her cheeks, her breath shallow. When their eyes met, the mask of steel Marcus wore cracked for half a second. A flicker of pain, a flicker of rage, a flicker of fatherhood. Amara exhaled, her voice barely a whisper carried by trembling relief. "Dad." That one word was soft, but it carried the force of a detonator. Brock's eyebrows shot up. "Dad," he repeated, confused. "No way. That's your dad?" Marcus's eyes returned to Brock like a lock closing into place. No emotion, no movement wasted, just a quiet, deadly focus. Amara's whisper had confirmed it. This wasn't just a stranger. This wasn't a customer who happened to walk in. This was the man whose daughter Brock had hit twice. The man whose daughter Brock had cornered. The man who was about to break the chain of fear holding this diner hostage. Brock forced a laugh, trying to regain control. "Look, sir. Whatever you think." Marcus took one more slow step forward. Tyler grabbed Brock's sleeve. "Don't," he whispered urgently. "Dude, don't mess with him." But Brock, blinded by ego, shoved Tyler off. "Relax. He's just some angry dad." He stopped, because just then, Marcus's hand, calm, steady, reached into his jacket pocket. The entire diner tensed, not because they thought he was reaching for a weapon, but because they could feel a shift, a storm gathering. Marcus pulled out something small, something that glinted under the diner lights. And that was the exact second the third plot twist began, before Brock even realized he had already lost. The truth Marcus reveals hits harder than any punch. The path between the diner booths felt unnaturally narrow as Marcus stepped fully into it. The lights overhead buzzed faintly, the only sound in the room aside from the jittery breaths customers tried to hide. Tyler and Mason backed up instinctively, bumping into a table behind them. Brock remained rooted in place, though his confidence had begun to crack around the edges. Marcus's boots stopped only a few feet from him. The man didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The sheer weight of his presence pressed down on the space like a closing fist. Brock swallowed hard but forced a crooked smirk. "Listen, sir. You're clearly confused. We were just, talking to her. That's all." Marcus tilted his head slightly, not enough to show emotion, but enough to sharpen the coldness in his eyes. "You think I'm confused?" he asked calmly. Brock's smirk faltered. Marcus continued, each word precise, measured, and razor-edged. "I watched you." A ripple went through the diners. Several people exchanged glances. Brock blinked. "Watched me? What?" Marcus nodded toward the front windows. "I was standing outside. Right there." He pointed to a spot just beyond the glass. The exact angle where someone could see Amara's booth perfectly. I saw you corner her, Marcus said. His voice didn't rise, but it grew heavier. I saw you knock her food over. Brock's throat bobbed. And I saw, Marcus added, eyes narrowing, your second slap. A collective gasp fluttered through the diner like a wave of wind sweeping through leaves. Brock's breath stuttered. For a moment, his mask slipped. Fear flickered through his eyes. He quickly straightened, trying to recover. Okay, maybe things got a little heated. Marcus stepped forward. Not fast, not aggressive, just an unspoken declaration of control. Tyler grabbed Mason's sleeve, whispering, "Dude, we're dead." Mason's face was chalk white, but Brock still clung to ego the way drowning men cling to debris. You can't just walk in here and… Yes, Marcus cut in, his voice a blade slicing through every excuse. I can. Silence pinned everyone to their seats. Marcus's gaze hardened into steel. I was going to take you down outside, he said, tone chillingly casual. In the parking lot, every head snapped toward him. Brock flinched. What? Marcus's eyes flashed not with anger, but with a cold, controlled fury, forged through years of discipline. But you, Marcus continued, stepping so close that Brock was forced to tilt his head up, had to humiliate my daughter in front of a crowd. He paused. The diner held its breath. Then Marcus leaned in, voice dropping to a low, lethal whisper that vibrated through the air. So now I'm going to deal with you in front of one. The words struck the room like a lightning bolt. A woman near the counter covered her mouth. A cook muttered, "Holy shit!" Even the lights seemed to flicker in response. Brock's jaw clenched. He tried to scoff, but his voice cracked. You think you scare me?" Marcus didn't blink. "You're already scared," he replied. "Your hands are shaking." Brock looked down involuntarily. They were. He quickly stuffed them into his pockets, but it was too late. Everyone had seen. Tyler whispered, "Bro, stop talking." "He's serious," Mason nodded violently. But Brock, cornered between pride and terror, refused to back down. "You're just her dad," he spat. "What are you going to do? Lecture me?" Marcus's expression didn't change. Instead, he said the sentence that turned every bone in the diner to ice. "Son, I'm a Navy SEAL." The room went dead silent. Even the ceiling fan seemed to hesitate mid-rotation. Brock's lips parted. His face drained. His bravado evaporated like mist. Marcus didn't step back. He didn't soften. He simply added, with the kind of calm that was more terrifying than shouting, "And you chose the worst possible day to touch my daughter." No one breathed. No one moved. Not even Brock. And this psychological blow is nothing compared to what happens when Brock makes one last reckless choice. The diner felt like a pressure cooker ready to explode. Every pair of eyes locked on the narrow space between Marcus and Brock. The tension vibrated through the air, thick enough to taste. Phones hovered in hesitant hands, customers unsure whether to film or flee. Marcus stood motionless, a statue carved from discipline and fury. Brock, on the other hand, was trembling not from fear alone, but from the sudden surge of reckless pride that sometimes fills a bully moments before he makes the worst decision of his life. For a fraction of a second, Brock's breathing hitched, his jaw clenched, his fists tightened. Tyler whispered urgently, "Dude, don't." Mason shook his head so hard it looked painful. "Brock, seriously." But Brock wasn't listening. He couldn't. Marcus's words, "I'm a Navy SEAL," had slammed into his ego like a hammer. And instead of stepping back, Brock did what unstable men do when their pride is cornered. He lunged. "Hey!" someone shouted, but it was too late. Brock, fueled by humiliation, drove his fist forward in a wild punch, aiming straight at Marcus's jaw. One last attempt to seize control, to regain dominance, to prove he wasn't afraid. It was a mistake. A catastrophic one. Marcus didn't flinch. He simply stepped to the side. Barely an inch. A movement so small, yet so controlled, that Brock's fist cut through empty air. His momentum betrayed him. His body pitched forward, stumbling into the space Marcus had just occupied. In one fluid motion, a motion that looked almost effortless, Marcus caught Brock's wrist, twisted it sharply, and pivoted. Brock's body flipped, slammed against the floor with a heavy thud that echoed through the diner. Gasps burst from every direction. A glass rattled on a nearby table. Brock wheezed, the air knocked out of him. Marcus leaned down, pinning Brock's arm behind his back with a precision that spoke of years of training, years of combat, years of mastering exactly how much pressure breaks a man. He didn't scream. He didn't rage. He didn't boast. He simply lowered his head to Brock's ear and whispered, calm as death, "Your punch is as weak as your self-respect." Brock's face burned with humiliation and agony. He grunted, struggling, but Marcus's hold was unshakable. This wasn't brutality. It was control. Absolute, clinical control. Phones began rising. Screens clicked on. Recordings started. Customers who'd been too afraid minutes ago were now documenting every second, knowing they were witnessing a turning point not just in the diner, but for Brock Hensley. Tyler panicked. "Stop filming. Turn that off." Mason waved his hands wildly. "Cut it out! You can't do that!" But no one listened. One customer muttered, "Should have thought about that before hitting the girl." Another whispered, "This man is trained. Those boys messed with the wrong family." Tyler's breathing turned sharp and ragged. He looked like he was debating whether to run or charge. Mason chose for him. "Help him," Mason hissed, grabbing Tyler's arm. "We can't let him get wrecked alone." But neither of them moved immediately. Fear glued their shoes to the floor. The sight of Brock, king of the hallways, the bully who strutted through Westbridge High like he owned it now, pinned helplessly under one man's hand. It was almost too unreal to process. Marcus wasn't even sweating. He wasn't even angry on the surface. He was composed, frighteningly composed. "Let him go," Tyler finally shouted, voice cracking. Marcus raised his head, eyes cold, steady. "You want to be next?" Tyler swallowed so loudly that people heard it. Mason took a shaky step forward anyway. Then another. Tyler followed, though everything in his body screamed at him to retreat. Because now, it wasn't just a beating. It wasn't just humiliation. This had become a battlefield, and Marcus Wells was the only one trained for war. Tyler and Mason make their move, unaware they're about to trigger something even more dangerous. Marcus kept Brock pinned to the floor with a single, controlled grip. One knee braced beside the boy's ribcage, one hand locking his wrist in a position that made resistance painful and useless. Brock squirmed, panting in humiliation, his bravado shattered. The situation should have ended there. Any rational person would have let it. But bullies rarely act rationally when their power is challenged. And Tyler, jittery and desperate, snapped first. He glanced around the diner, searching for something, anything, that could give him an edge. His eyes darted to a nearby table where a half-finished root beer sat beside an empty glass bottle. In his panic-clouded mind, that bottle became a lifeline, a weapon. His way to turn the tide. Tyler grabbed it. Mason's eyes widened. "Dude, no." But Tyler was already moving. He crept behind Marcus, gripping the neck of the bottle so tightly his knuckles blanched. Sweat rolled down his temple. Fear, anger, loyalty to Brock, they blurred together into something reckless and stupid. Mason, torn between cowardice and misguided brotherhood, took a deep breath and rushed forward after him. The customers gasped. One woman whispered, "Oh God." No, another clutched her purse and stood to move away. Marcus, still crouched over Brock, didn't appear to notice the danger. His gaze remained fixed downward, face unreadable, jaw tight with a quiet fury. Tyler's steps were silent. He raised the bottle high, aiming for the back of Marcus's skull. He swung, but Marcus Wells was a Navy SEAL, and Navy SEALs don't need to see danger to feel it. The split second before the bottle could land, Marcus moved with speed too fast to follow. His senses had picked up the shift in the air, the footstep, the shallow inhale behind him, just enough time to act. He twisted. His hand shot up and caught Tyler's wrist mid-swing. The bottle halted inches from Marcus's head. Gasps erupted across the diner. Tyler's eyes bulged as Marcus tightened his grip. The pressure forced Tyler's fingers open, and the bottle slipped free. Marcus caught it with his other hand before it could drop and shatter. With a controlled movement, he redirected the bottle downward and gently tapped it against the floor so it broke safely away from everyone. No glass flying, no danger to the diners. A clean, calculated choice. Tyler was frozen in shock. Marcus rose to his feet in one smooth motion, still gripping Tyler's wrist. Without breaking stance, he pivoted, used Tyler's momentum against him, and flung him sideways onto the booth cushions. Tyler crashed into the table, sending silverware and napkins exploding everywhere. Mason, running with more courage than skill, reached Marcus next. Marcus didn't even look at him. He simply extended an arm and swept it across Mason's chest, an effortless deflection. Mason was lifted off his feet and sent tumbling into the booth opposite Tyler. Both boys groaned, tangled in a mess of ketchup bottles, menus, and humiliation. The diner erupted in murmurs. "Did you see that? He didn't even break a sweat. Those kids messed with the wrong man." Marcus turned slowly, eyes scanning the room to ensure everyone was safe. His breathing was steady, his posture upright, no signs of strain, only controlled vigilance. Amara sat in her booth, hands over her mouth, eyes wide with something between awe and disbelief. She had always known her father was strong. He had medals, stories, scars, but watching him move like that, like danger was merely an inconvenience, he swatted aside, shook her to her core. "Dad," she whispered again, but this time with a different tone, a tone filled with stunned admiration. Marcus didn't take his eyes off the boys. "Stay back, sweetheart," he said softly, but firmly. Tyler and Mason scrambled, trying to regain their footing, but their legs trembled. Brock lay on the floor, dazed and silent for once in his life. For a brief moment, it looked like the chaos was over, but the diner door chimed again. King. All eyes turned, because someone new had arrived. And this person wasn't here for lunch. This person was here for war, of a different kind. Brock's mother enters, and she brings legal fire with her. The diner, already shaken from the chaos, fell into another layer of tension when Brock's phone, half cracked from the earlier scuffle, began buzzing violently on the floor beside him. The screen lit up, flashing a name that made his blood surge with desperate hope. Mom. Brock scrambled, wincing, and slapped his hand over the phone like it was a life raft. His breathing was frantic. Everything he'd built, his confidence, his power, his carefully protected image, was collapsing in front of an entire room of witnesses. Marcus stood a few feet away, posture steady, one hand lightly extended in a silent command for Tyler and Mason to stay down. They obeyed, trembling. Brock's voice cracked as he pressed the phone to his ear. Mom, listen, you need to come here." A few customers exchanged uneasy glances. Marcus didn't move. He simply observed, measured, waiting. Brock pushed himself halfway off the floor, pointing a shaking finger at Marcus. You're dead," he stammered. "You hear me? My mom is Helena Brooks. She's gonna sue you into the ground." A murmur swept through the diner. Helena Brooks. The name wasn't unfamiliar. In a town like Westbridge, reputations spread quickly, especially the kind that made principals nervous and school boards whisper in hallways. Helena Brooks was a lawyer known for two things: her ruthless courtroom victories and her tendency to protect her son from consequences with the force of a legal sledgehammer. She had buried bullying accusations before. She had twisted narratives. She had turned victims into suspects. And now she was coming here. Tyler exhaled shakily. "Oh, thank God. She'll fix this." Mason nodded, though his face was still ghost pale. Yeah. Helena will handle it." Brock, feeling the familiar surge of arrogance returning, pushed himself onto one knee. "Yeah, old man," he spat at Marcus. "You just assaulted a minor. You're finished. My mom wins every case she touches." Marcus looked at him the way a surgeon looks at an infection, calmly, clinically, without fear. Good, Marcus said. Brock blinked. Well, what? Marcus took one step forward, just one. It was enough to make Tyler and Mason flatten themselves against the booth. Good, Marcus repeated, voice steady as granite, because that means she'll get to review this. He lifted his chin slightly. Around the diner, more than a dozen phones were raised recording. Another dozen had been recording since the first slap, and several more customers had already backed up their footage to the cloud. Marcus's voice dropped into something chillingly composed. She'll get to watch the video from 30-day. Different angles. The room erupted in whispers. Brock's face drained instantly. His mouth opened, but no words came out. Marcus continued, tone unwavering. Assault, harassment, intent to harm, threatening my daughter, threatening a waitress. His eyes narrowed. And an attempted attack with a glass bottle. Tyler crumpled into his seat. Mason covered his face with both hands. Brock shook his head, panic flooding back. She'll fix it. She always does. Marcus didn't blink. Not this time. The diner door chimed. King! Every head turned. A woman in a slate-gray blazer stormed inside with heels clicking like gunshots, sharp, confident, furious. Her presence filled the diner with a different kind of weight, a legal weight, cold and calculating. Her voice cut through the silence. Brock! Brock wilted. Mom. Helena Brooks scanned the room. Shattered glass, overturned tables. 3 boys disheveled and terrified. Then her eyes landed on Marcus. And finally, on Amara. Her jaw clenched. She didn't need evidence to understand something had gone terribly wrong. But Helena's strength wasn't in understanding. It was in manipulating. She straightened her blazer. Someone explain what happened here. Marcus raised his phone, already displaying a paused video screen. I can. Helena stiffened. For the first time in years, Brock's mother realized this might be the battle she couldn't win. And the moment the police arrive, things get far, far worse for Brock's family. The air outside the Rose Hill Diner felt colder than before. The sun was still shining, but something about the atmosphere had shifted heavy, electrified, tense. Customers who had stepped out to breathe now lingered in the parking lot, phones still in hand, whispering rapidly among themselves. Then the distant wail of sirens cut through the murmur. Red and blue lights flickered across the asphalt. 2 patrol cars swung into the lot, tires crunching over gravel, doors flying open with a uniform precision that suggested they already knew who they wanted to confront. Marcus stepped outside with Amara beside him, keeping one protective hand hovering at her back. Helena Brooks marched out moments later with Brock limping behind her, Tyler and Mason trailing like frightened shadows. The officers approached 3 of them, and from the moment their eyes landed on Marcus, the diner crowd felt the energy shift again. Sir, the lead officer said sternly, we received a call about an assault. Multiple minors are claiming you attacked them. Brock straightened, looking proud of himself for the first time since he'd been pinned to the diner floor. He brushed dirt from his jacket and smirked. Yeah, Brock said, voice regaining its swagger. That's him. He went crazy. Just ask anyone inside. Tyler nodded vigorously. Mason sniffed loudly, trying to look injured. Helena folded her arms. Officers, I expect this to be handled properly. That man laid hands on my son. Marcus said nothing. He simply watched the officers, calm and unshaken. The lead cop continued, we're going to need. But before he could finish, another officer stepped forward, pausing mid-stride. His eyes widened, disbelief flickering before settling into something like awe. Commander Wells? He asked quietly. Marcus Wells? Marcus finally spoke. Sergeant Ruiz. Brock's eyebrows shot up. Helena blinked. Tyler's mouth fell open. Ruiz stepped closer, extending a hand. Marcus shook it firmly. You saved my team, Ruiz said, voice thickens with emotion. 8 years ago, Eastern Ridge. We wouldn't have made it out without you. Gasps rippled through the bystanders. Brock stumbled. Wait, what? Ruiz turned toward the lead officer, posture shifting instantly. We need to take this seriously. Every claim, every detail. And first thing we review the diner's security footage. Helena stiffened. Now, hold on. It's protocol, Ruiz said, cutting her off respectfully but firmly. Especially when the accused is someone with a confirmed service record and the complainants have prior school discipline reports. Brock's face drained. What? Tyler looked around wildly. We're screwed. Mason whispered. No, 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 no. Ruiz stepped past them and entered the diner to retrieve the footage. The other officers followed, one of them already asking the manager where the security room was. Brock began shaking his head violently. Mom! Mom! Do something! Helena grabbed his arm, nails digging into the fabric of his jacket. But even she seemed rattled. Stay quiet, she hissed. Marcus finally turned to her calm, unblinking. You wanted a legal process. You're about to get one. Amara watched him, her chest tightening with both fear and something close to pride. She had never seen her father like this, composed, powerful, untouchable. Ruiz returned moments later with 2 officers in tow and a USB drive in hand. We have multiple angles, he said. Crystal clear. We also have at least 20 witness statements. Helena paled. Brock's lips trembled. Marcus stood silent, steady as a pillar. Ruiz's voice hardened. Ma'am, unless you have substantial evidence to counter what we're about to review, I suggest you prepare your son for a serious conversation at the station. Brock's bravado collapsed. His breathing turned shallow. The truth had caught up with him and it wasn't letting go. Marcus reveals a secret even the police didn't know, one that turns Brock's situation from bad to catastrophic. The officers escorted everyone back inside the diner, where the atmosphere felt heavier than before, thick with tension, anticipation, and the quiet dread clinging to Brock's group. Customers pressed along the walls, phones still recording. Employees stood behind the counter, whispering to each other in disbelief. Marcus remained in the center of the room, posture tall, calm, unshakably steady. Amara stood beside him, her cheeks still swollen but her eyes clear for the first time since lunch began. Sergeant Ruiz connected the USB drive to the diner's wall-mounted TV. A sharp beep sounded before the first video loaded. The screen flickered, then displayed the moment Brock knocked Amara's tray to the floor. Several customers winced. Another angle showed the first slap. A third camera captured the second blow, Brock's hand whipping across Amara's face with brutal force. Gasps rippled across the room. One older woman muttered, "That poor girl." A teen near the door whispered, "They really did that? In public?" Tyler covered his face with his hands. Mason looked like he might faint. Brock stared at the floor, jaw shaking, humiliation and panic twisting in his expression. Ruiz crossed his arms. Hard to argue with that. Helena Brooks stepped forward, grasping for composure. "My son, this must be taken in context." Marcus finally spoke. "The context," he said clearly, "is that my daughter didn't provoke them." His voice vibrated through the diner, controlled, steady, unarguable. "And the truth," he continued, "is that this didn't start today." All eyes swung to Marcus. Even the officers paused. Brock's head jerked up. "No, no, he's lying." Marcus ignored him. "They've been harassing my daughter for weeks." The room stiffened. Helena's mouth opened, then closed. Ruiz frowned. "Is that true?" Marcus nodded once. "They followed her around school, whispered slurs at her locker, cornered her in hallways. Today was just the first time they had an audience." Tyler shook his head violently. "That's not." Marcus raised a hand. Cool, commanding, absolute. Tyler fell silent. Then Marcus pulled out his phone. "And I have proof." He tapped the screen. A set of screenshots appeared, Amara's private messages, filled with cruel comments, threats, and mocking emojis. Another thread showed a burner account sending her late-night messages. "We know where you sit at lunch. Better not come to school tomorrow. People like you don't belong here." Several customers gasped. A man near the booth muttered, "These kids are monsters." Ruiz stepped forward, expression hardening. "You sent these?" he demanded. Brock sputtered. I didn't." But Marcus didn't let him finish. "Not just messages," Marcus continued. "Pictures." Ruiz took the phone and scrolled. His jaw clenched. "Stalking. intimidation, coordinated harassment. The entire diner recoiled. Helena tried to regain her footing. You can't prove. Marcus looked directly at Brock. You used your mother's reputation to shield you. You thought no one would challenge you. You thought my daughter would stay silent. The room vibrated with the weight of his words. She did stay silent. Until I arrived. Customers stared at Brock now with a new kind of disgust, not just for hitting Amara, but for tormenting her long before today. Brock's bravado collapsed completely. His voice shrank to a whisper. Mom, do something. But Helena had nothing left to fight with. The truth was too heavy, the evidence too clear, the town's eyes too wide. Marcus stepped back, allowing silence to settle before delivering the final blow. Now everyone will see who the real threat is, and it's not my daughter. The diner erupted in shocked whispers. And once the case moves to the station, the consequences strike even harder. The Westbridge Police Department was usually quiet at this time of day, its fluorescent lights humming softly above tidy desks and half-empty coffee mugs. Today, it buzzed with unusual activity. Officers moved briskly through the halls, while whispers followed the arrival of 3 teenagers who were no longer swaggering bullies, but shaken boys with pale faces and trembling hands. Brock, Tyler, and Mason sat on a bench outside the processing room, wrists trembling, their bravado stripped clean. Brock's jaw clenched so hard it looked painful. Tyler chewed his nails until they bled. Mason kept staring at the floor, whispering prayers under his breath. Marcus and Amara waited across the lobby, under the watchful eye of Sergeant Ruiz. Though Marcus stood tall, there was a tension in him, an alertness that said this was far from over. An officer approached Ruiz and handed him a folder. Security footage verified. Witness statements align with the videos, and the messages Commander Wells provided check out. All 3 boys participated. Ruiz shot a hard look toward the bench. Figures. The processing door clicked open. Brock Hensley, an officer called. Brock stood shakily. His confidence had crumbled into dust. He glanced back at Tyler and Mason, as if begging them for rescue, but both looked equally lost. Step by step, he disappeared into the interrogation room. Minutes later, the door to the station slammed open. Helena Brooks stormed inside, heels clacking furiously against the linoleum. Her power suit was immaculate, her makeup flawless, but her expression was a mixture of rage and disbelief. "Where is my son?" she demanded. Ruiz stepped forward, calm, collected. "Mrs. Brooks, your son is being processed for multiple charges." Helena scoffed. "Processed? For what? He's the victim here. This man assaulted him." She jabbed a finger at Marcus. Marcus didn't flinch. Ruiz sighed. "Ma'am, please lower your voice. We have video evidence contradicting your claim." Helena spun toward Marcus, venom in her tone. This is your fault. You intimidated those children." Marcus cut her off with a quiet firmness that sliced through her accusations. "I protected my daughter." His voice was calm, but something in it made Helena hesitate. Just for a moment. Ruiz lifted the folder. "We have 30 witnesses confirming Brock initiated physical assault. The messages you said didn't exist? We traced them. They were sent from Brock's and Tyler's accounts." Helena paled, but only slightly. "I'll fight it. Every accusation. Every charge. And we'll welcome that," Ruiz replied dryly. "Discovery will not be kind to your son." Silence followed. A door creaked open. An officer ushered Brock back into the lobby. His face was streaked with tears he tried to wipe away before his mother saw. But Helena noticed. "Mom," he whispered, voice cracking. They're saying I could get charged. They're saying Helena grabbed his shoulders. "Don't panic. I'll handle this." But Marcus stepped forward, his tone still level, still devastatingly steady. "No, Mrs. Brooks," he said softly. "This time, you won't." Helena's eyes burned into him. "Is that a threat?" "It's a fact," Marcus replied. Behind him, Amara watched silently, her father's strength filling the entire lobby. Ruiz turned to Helena. "Your son won't be released until the magistrate reviews the evidence. Prepare for a long evening." The color drained from Brock's face entirely. Tyler and Mason slumped deeper into their seats. For the first time, Helena Brooks looked unsure. Marcus placed a reassuring hand on Amara's shoulder. "This," he said quietly, "is only the beginning. Marcus has one more move, one that forces Brock to confront the fear he's been hiding behind cruelty." The interrogation room was small, almost claustrophobic, a square box of cinder-block walls and a metal table bolted to the floor. Fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead, casting a cold blue tint across the space. It smelled of old paperwork, disinfectant, and fear. Brock Hensley sat alone at the table, his hands shaking uncontrollably. His eyes were swollen, his breath shallow. The arrogant swagger he always carried, the one that made hallways part for him, was gone. Completely stripped away. He looked smaller now, young in a way that was almost pitiful, yet no less guilty for it. The door clicked. Brock jerked in his seat. Marcus Wells stepped inside. He didn't slam the door. He didn't stomp. He didn't bring force with him. He brought silence. And that silence was somehow louder than anything Brock had heard all day. Marcus closed the door gently behind him. Then he took the seat across from Brock, folding his hands on the table with deliberate calm. His posture was relaxed, but there was an unmistakable heaviness in his presence, an authority forged in war zones, not high school cafeterias. Brock swallowed hard. I'm not supposed to talk to you," he muttered, voice breaking. "I asked for this meeting," Marcus said evenly, and the officers agreed. Brock's throat bobbed. "Why?" Marcus didn't answer immediately. Instead, he leaned forward slightly, studying Brock the way someone studies the source of a problem rather than the problem itself. "You've been hurting my daughter for weeks," Marcus finally said, voice low but razor-sharp. "And I want to hear from you." "Why?" Brock shook his head frantically. I didn't." Marcus cut him off with a quiet, surgical precision. "No lies. Not today." Brock deflated with a shuddered breath. His eyes darted to the corner camera, then back to Marcus. She acted like she was better than everyone," Brock whispered. Marcus didn't blink. "She stayed quiet. She kept to herself. That's why." Brock snapped, then instantly regretted raising his voice. He hunched forward, fingers twisting in his lap. Everyone liked her. Teachers, students. She didn't even try, she just fit. My mom always says people judge us harder. I got sick of it. Marcus's expression didn't soften. "So you followed her, messaged her, hit her, because she fit?" Brock squeezed his eyes shut. "I don't know why I did it. I just wanted her to feel small." Marcus leaned in. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. "You succeeded," he said. "She was afraid to walk home, afraid to sit in class, afraid to eat lunch. She thought something was wrong with her. And all that fear," he tapped the table once, "came from you." Brock's composure snapped. Tears rolled down his cheeks, fast and hot. "I'm sorry," he cried. "I swear I didn't mean for it to get that bad. The guys, they egged me on. And today, I just lost it." Marcus sat still as stone. "This isn't about losing control," he said quietly. "This is about the choices you made when you had control." Brock's sobbing grew louder. His shoulders shook. For the first time in his life, he wasn't the strongest voice in the room. Marcus leaned forward until his voice was a whisper, cold, precise, unwavering. "I will make sure you never do this to anyone again." Brock froze. The words hit like a physical blow. Marcus stood, his chair scraping back with calm authority. "This town is about to see the truth. Every parent, every teacher, every student you've ever scared." Brock looked up, eyes wide with dread. Marcus reached for the door. "Your mother can't protect you from this," he added without turning around. "Not anymore." He stepped out. The door clicked shut, and Brock understood. This was only the beginning of what he would face. In the courtroom, justice lands harder than any punch. The county courthouse was packed by the time the case of State versus Brock Hensley was called. Word had traveled fast. Students, parents, teachers, even local reporters filled the gallery. The polished wooden benches creaked under the weight of bodies leaning forward, waiting to see justice unfold. Amara sat between Marcus and Sergeant Ruiz in the second row. Though her cheek still bore faint bruising, she looked steadier than she had in weeks. The courtroom lights reflected off the tears she fought to keep back, but her chin was held high. At the defense table sat Brock Hensley, hands clasped, eyes hollow, and next to him, his mother, Helena Brooks, clad in her most intimidating power suit. Yet for the first time, her confidence had fractures, deep ones. The bailiff called, "All rise," and Judge Eleanor Hart stepped into the courtroom. Her eyes were sharp, her posture upright, and her reputation ironclad. She had sentenced murderers and white-collar criminals with the same unwavering tone. Today, she examined Brock with that same cold scrutiny. "You may be seated," she said, opening the file before her. The prosecutor wasted no time. "Your Honor, the defendant stands charged with assault, harassment, repeated threats, and racially motivated misconduct against the victim, Amara Wells. We have 30 eyewitness statements, multiple camera angles, and documented digital harassment." A murmur rippled through the room. Helena stood. "Your Honor, my son was provoked. The evidence lacks context." The man accusing him, Judge Hart, raised a hand. "Mrs. Brooks, sit." The tone wasn't angry. It was worse, disappointed. Helena reluctantly obeyed. Ruiz took the stand first, presenting the videos. The footage projected across the courtroom was damning. Brock slapping Amara, knocking her food over, grabbing her shoulder. The second angle showed Tyler throwing the glass. Another captured Amara's terrified reaction. Gasps, whispers, and even a few tears filled the gallery. When the digital evidence followed the messages, the stalking photos, Judge Hart's jaw tightened. Helena rose again, attempting objection after objection. "This lacks authentication. My son was misunderstood. The victim misinterpreted." Each one was shut down. "Mrs. Brooks," the judge finally said, voice slicing through the noise, "if you obstruct again, I will hold you in contempt." Helena froze, face flushed with humiliation. Brock was next to testify. His voice shook as he admitted to some involvement, but insisted he never meant for it to go that far. No one believed him, not after seeing the footage. When Marcus testified, the courtroom fell completely silent. His calm recounting of what he saw, what he endured, what his daughter endured, felt heavier than any legal argument. Finally, Judge Hart closed the file. "Brock Hensley," she said, "the evidence against you is overwhelming. You will complete 200 hours of community service, attend mandatory counseling, and accept a formal disciplinary record for assault, harassment, and discriminatory conduct." Brock hunched forward, crying quietly, but Judge Hart wasn't finished. "As for you, Mrs. Brooks," Helena looked up sharply, "I am recommending a formal investigation into your role in suppressing and concealing multiple bullying complaints at Westbridge High." The courtroom erupted. Helena's face turned white. Brock stared at her, horrified. Court adjourned. The gavel struck. Marcus gently placed his hand on Amara's shoulder. She exhaled shakily, relief and vindication mixing together. Justice had been served, at least on paper. But as they stepped out into the bright sunlight, Marcus knew legal justice was only one half. Emotional justice was still waiting. Amara must now confront the weight of everything she's endured. The house was quiet that evening, too quiet. Not the peaceful kind of silence, but the heavy kind that settles after a storm, when everything is still standing yet nothing feels the same. The lamps glowed softly in the living room, casting warm light across the framed photos on the wall. Marcus in uniform, Amara at her last birthday, a family frozen in better moments. Amara sat, curled on the couch, her knees pulled to her chest, a blanket wrapped loosely around her shoulders. She had changed out of her school uniform, but the bruise on her cheek stood stark against her skin, a reminder she couldn't run from. Her eyes were distant, unfocused, as if she were staring at something only she could see. Marcus entered quietly, 2 mugs of hot cocoa in hand. He didn't speak until he sat beside her. "Here," he murmured, offering a mug. Amara accepted it, but her hands trembled. "Thanks," she whispered. For a long moment, neither spoke. The soft ticking of the wall clock filled the space. Finally, Amara let out a shaky breath. "Dad." Her voice cracked. "I'm sorry." Marcus turned to her, eyebrows knitting. "For what?" She swallowed, tears pooling. "For not telling you sooner. For not fighting back. For letting them." Her words broke as the first tear fell. "For being so weak." Marcus's breath stilled. In one smooth motion, he set his mug down and pulled her gently into his arms. Amara buried her face in his chest, sobbing quietly. His hand rested against the back of her head, steady and warm. "Look at me," he said softly. She hesitated, then lifted her gaze. Marcus's eyes were deep with something she rarely saw in them: vulnerability. "You were never weak," he said. "Fear doesn't make you weak, Amara. Fear keeps you alive." She blinked, confused. Marcus exhaled slowly, a memory flickering across his expression. "Do you know how many times I was scared during my deployments?" Amara shook her head. "All of them," he said. "Every mission. Every night in the desert. Every time I wasn't sure I'd come home." He paused, voice thickening. "But I kept going. Not because I wasn't afraid, but because I chose to move anyway." Amara's lips parted, absorbing his words. Marcus continued, "Courage isn't loud. It's not what you see in movies. Courage is what you did today. You stood there. You told them your father was coming. You held yourself together even when they hurt you. That isn't weakness, sweetheart. That's strength." Her tears slowed, not from sadness but relief. "Really," she whispered. Marcus cupped her cheek gently, avoiding the bruise. "You survived them. You endured them. And today, you faced them." For the first time in weeks, Amara's shoulders loosened. Her breathing steadied. A small, trembling smile slowly took shape. I want to go back," she said quietly. Marcus blinked. "To school?" She nodded. "I don't want them to think they broke me. I want to walk in there and hold my head up." Pride flickered in Marcus's eyes, soft and powerful. "Then that's exactly what you'll do." Amara leaned into his shoulder, this time without shaking. The storm inside her had begun to settle, replaced by something sturdier, something brighter. For the first time, she felt it: not fear, not shame, but strength. And on Monday morning, the entire school sees a very different Amara Wells. Monday morning arrived with a crisp breeze, and a sky so clear it almost felt symbolic, like the world itself had been reset. The campus of Westbridge High buzzed louder than usual. Students crowded near the lockers, whispering in clusters, glancing repeatedly toward the front gates. Everyone knew she was coming. Everyone had heard the story, and everyone was waiting for the girl whose father was a Navy SEAL. Amara Wells stood at the edge of the courtyard, backpack slung over one shoulder. Her heart beat fast, but not from fear, at least not the same fear that had weighed her down for weeks. Today, the fear felt different, smaller, manageable, like something she could hold in her hands instead of drowning in. She stepped forward. Each footfall on the pavement felt stronger than the last. Her posture, straight. Her head, lifted. Her eyes, clear. Whispers rippled through the courtyard. "Is that her?" "Yeah, that's Amara Wells." Unquote. "She's the one Brock hit, right? Her dad took them down single-handedly. No wonder she's so calm." But Amara wasn't calm because of her father. She was calm because she had survived. As she walked, students parted without realizing it, giving her space, giving her acknowledgement, giving her something she hadn't had since she transferred here: respect. At first, she didn't look at anyone. Her gaze was fixed ahead, toward the doors of the main building. But as the whispers softened, curiosity nudged her, and she let her eyes drift from face to face. No contempt, no mockery, no predatory smirks, only recognition, and something close to admiration. Near the cafeteria entrance, a small group of students peeled away from the wall and approached her. Amara tensed instinctively, the old reflex flaring up, but their faces weren't hostile. It was the boy who had tried to stand up for her in the diner before Tyler smashed the glass to scare him. His face still held guilt. Beside him were two girls who had witnessed everything that day but had been too afraid to speak. The boy cleared his throat. "Hey, Amara, can we talk for a second?" She stopped. Her fingers tightened around her backpack strap, but she nodded. He swallowed, choosing his words carefully. "We wanted to say sorry. For not helping sooner. For not saying anything at school. It wasn't right." The two girls nodded, eyes softening. "And if you need witnesses," one of them added firmly, "we're here. For court, for school hearings, whatever you need. We saw everything." Amara blinked, stunned, not because of the apology but because of the sincerity. It was written all over them, regret, shame, and a genuine desire to make things right. She felt something warm unfurl in her chest. "Thank you," she said softly. "Really." They smiled small, hopeful smiles before stepping aside, giving her space to continue her walk. As Amara moved toward her first class, a sudden clarity washed over her. The fear she'd carried for weeks loosened its grip. The weight on her shoulders felt lighter. For the first time, she felt something she hadn't dared imagine. Safe. And it wasn't because her father stood behind her. It was because she had stood up. As she climbed the school steps, sunlight breaking across her face, Amara let a smile spread. Gentle but strong. "Not because Dad's protecting me," she thought, "but because I finally protected myself." And with that, she stepped into a new beginning. And just like that, the boys who ruled the school with fear finally met someone they couldn't intimidate, someone who didn't need to raise his voice to make the whole diner freeze. But the real victory wasn't Marcus pinning them down. It was Amara finally walking back into school with her head high, proving that strength isn't always loud and justice doesn't always arrive in a courtroom. Now tell me, what do you think was the most fitting moment in this story? Drop your opinion below. I'm reading every comment. If you want more stories where bullies get exactly what they deserve, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. The next episode, trust me, you won't want to miss it.